Welcome to the Efed podcast, the podcast exploring our fantasy wrestling hobby where the wrestling is written, but the characters are real. I'm your host, Mikey Unlikely, and I'd like to thank you for joining us here on the Atomic Dropcast Network. Everybody, welcome back to another edition of the Efed podcast, episode 60. I'm so glad you decided to join us. Thank you so much for making us a part of your day. Today, I'm joined again, as you know from last week, my new co-host. He's new. It's Brian. Brian, longtime producer, still producer, and now co-host of the show. Brian, how are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Glad to be here. Glad to be back. Episode 60. It's great. How are you doing there, sir?
I'm doing great. Enjoying a nice cold drink on this evening. And what an evening it is, Brian.
What an evening for e-fedding.
There you have it. I'm excited to talk about all kinds of things. We got Mel on the show today. Mel is the handler of Jessica Matthews and many other characters. Recently e-tired from e-wrestling.
Smartest one of the bunch.
Decided to step away from the game. Was recently in hybrid wrestling, which recently closed its doors as well. A lot of recentlys.
Hate to hear it.
Hey, hate to hear it. Hybrid wrestling was a part of the Feds list early on in the eFed podcast episodes when we used to run down multiple Feds a day. And so sad to see them close their doors. I know they had a lot of good members, including Matt Loaf, who's in our community, and a few others as well. So shout out to those guys. Hope you're doing well and in whatever you're doing. And there's many other Feds to be checked out.
Many of which you can hear about right here on the eFed podcast.
True story. Speaking of which, we're going to cut right into what else we can see on the show today is going to be Project Honor. They're going to be on the eFed Spotlight. They were on season 1 at one point, and we're going to talk about them again and see if they are the Fed for you. Of course, if you want to have your Fed on the eFed Spotlight, just get a hold of us. Over on Twitter at the eFed Podcast, over on Facebook at the eFed Podcast, over on YouTube, the eFed Podcast. Wherever you go, you're going to find us at the eFed Podcast. Isn't that right, Brian?
That is incredibly correct. efedpodcast.com.
Not only that, but it's patreon.com/eFed podcast. We would appreciate if you checked it out. Obviously, we're a free podcast dropping each and every week, but you can catch us ad-free early over at patreon.com/eFed podcast, as well as a couple other perks in the Discord with the Bad Graps. Each and every month we get together with our patrons and do something, whether it's a Q&A, a Bad Graps, or watch something together.
Definitely. We try to keep it light, keep it fun, give everyone their money's worth. I mean, come on, you can't afford not to join.
That's right. Over at patreon.com/eFed podcast. We've also got the eFed podcast question of the week this week, and we're going to be talking about secondary characters. Brian, you've got a secondary character, don't you?
I do indeed. The Lost Cause, Victor Vacio.
Vic Vacio is a great character over at Defiance Wrestling. One that I've come to enjoy, and I'm excited to see where he's going to go. And you can catch his t-shirt over at efedtees.com.
efedtees.com, efedmerch.com,
and
ewtees.com. Had to think about that one.
Yes, we've got that and much, much more on the show. We're going to talk about secondary characters. I remember when I was handling the Dibbins, my famous tag team.
The Dibbins are always a fun read.
I say famous. Famous in Defiance and UTA.
Infamous.
And so let's dive into it. I'm excited to talk to our guests today, and we've got so much more than that. But first, here's a word from our sponsors.
This is Lee Best, the GOD of HOWrestling.com, coming to you live from the High Octane Studios, where one of the official sponsors of the eFed podcast. Join us every Saturday night at 7:30 on twitch.tv/HOWrestling. We present live to you Refueled, the premier RP destination for all eFeds.
The eFed podcast is a totally free podcast that drops each and every single week for your e-wrestling ears on a multitude of apps. If you'd like to support the show, however, the best way to do so is over at patreon.com/eFed podcast. For as little as $3 a month, you can support both Brian and myself as we crank out more e-wrestling content with perks such as early releases and special Discord designations. And if that's not enough EW action for you, jump up to the $10 a month tier and you can get a free EWT's t-shirt design, early and ad-free editions of the show, as well as access to our monthly Q&As, Bad Graps, and more. And if you'd like to be a sponsor on the show and get your ad played, the best way to do that is the sponsor level on Patreon with all of the previous perks plus weekly commercials on the show. Check it out over at patreon.com/Efed podcast. We greatly appreciate your consideration.
Occupy Pro Wrestling, putting the smart back into smart mark since 2012, with a community on Discord and message boards, merchandise, a weekly vodcast on Twitch, and much more. Check out everything from us and our site partners at OccupyProWrestling.com.
Efed Tees, the #1 source for Efed merchandise, offering custom merchandise made for your wrestler, tag team, stable, or Efed. Whether you want a high-quality t-shirt, face mask, hoodie, hat, it doesn't matter. We can help you out over at efedtees.com. Do you have a custom logo for your wrestler? Awesome. We're going to slap it on a shirt and help you out real fast. If not, no problem at all. We have a custom design service too. You can work with a graphic artist to get the perfect design made for your character. Go on over to ewtees.com and click on Want a Shirt to get your shirt started. efedtees.com.
Defiance, an angle-fed boasting 8 years of continuous fantasy wrestling. Defiance offers opportunities for original characters, micros, a standalone website utilizing Backstage 3 script, and a forum hosted on the long-running FWrestling.com, as well as a roster full of some of the most experienced writers in the game. Come see for yourself at DefianceWrestling.com. That's DefianceWrestling.com.
Welcome back to the Efed podcast. Question of the week. I'm excited to give you this one, guys. And this is a pretty good one, I think. Do you have a secondary character that deserves a good run? And what's stopping you?
Very good question.
Brian, like we mentioned at the top of the show, you've got a secondary character. I've had some in my past. I think all of us at one point or another want to try something different.
100%.
What do you think about the question?
Great question. Just, we're not even seeing these answers yet. I think it's going to, most of, the mean is going to boil down to time because it is a secondary character.
Absolutely. So on Twitter Machine, we've got some responses here at Whammy Bar.
Crazy enough, this was originally a secondary character I was going to use for like a few months until I get ideas for my main one. But months turned into years as I got more comfortable with this one. Eventually, I decided to keep this as a main as I retired my old character.
Nice. Interesting way to go about it. And that's Griffin Hawkins, of course.
The old flip-flop.
Yeah, you start writing something new and you get so much into the new stuff that the old stuff doesn't seem so cool.
There you go.
At Cross Rakoba,
I have Al Jabroni. 3 words stop him. Sad jerking commences. Okay.
All right. We're going to move right past that one.
Yep.
At X0ENT, that's XER0ENT.
My first character is Kano, that unstable bastard, but my second character is Tasmania. That guy deserved a good run, but he is having a run of his lifetime trying to be a double or triple champion in New Extremes Wrestling. But what is stopping him? Well, over here in my Fed, booking.
Sounds like a busy guy.
Booking will get you.
It will. Brian knows that very well.
Very, very.
Up next, we got Armenian Beast.
As a matter of fact, I'm debuting my 4th character.
Ooh.
Oh, boy.
Good luck with that one, Brian.
The DJIBOUTIAN Beast.
The Djiboutian.
The Djiboutian Beast. Next week, parentheses, in an exhibition match. Need to clear up my schedule a bit. But then it's off to the UGWC.
I love it. He sends in these characters all the time. And him and I both did a character from the same area, which is odd. I swear I didn't steal it.
Well, apparently the Beast is UGWC or bust.
That's right. At Dashing Doctor.
Ryder was originally a secondary character. He has shifted into my main character as my style and the kind of character I want to portray has changed. So nothing is stopping that character, apparently.
Nothing at all, yeah. I like it. Second character becomes the first character again. Interestingly enough, he just wanted to do something different, and it turned into what he enjoyed more.
Yeah, times change. You move on. You grow.
Adapt. I like it. At Real Shadow Dar.
My second character is Serena Valentine. She's like an insane zombie character that bites people and laughs about it. What's stopping me is that she don't have an account.
Interesting. I like the zombie character.
I'm more interested in how not having an account stops someone.
Over on the Discord side of things, we got Tony.
Tony says, A, yes. B, waiting on that special Fed to open up.
Hey-oh. I know which one he's talking about.
Ooh, intrigue.
At number 2 in votes and number 1 in your hearts. This is Fuzz.
Hey, Fuzz. A, yes. B, time, effort, want or need. Take your pick.
Fair enough. At Meg.
Meg loves coupons. Meg says, no, all my secondary characters accomplished what they needed to accomplish.
Hey, she's rocking a championship right now, if I'm not mistaken, at least time of recording.
I say, good on you, Meg.
At Alias with a soft D but a hard G.
Alias actually is a secondary character, having had successful runs with my primary, Lee Stone, and another secondary, Kyrian King. Instead of what's stopping me, I'll say what inspired me to use this one. Nope, sorry, that wasn't the question. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. He continues. I was coming up with small ideas that were creative as individual pieces of writing, but didn't necessarily piece together well as an overall story. The Alias character's personality allowed me the creativity to go in that direction more than the others did. And now I can challenge myself to find a story thread to run all the ideas into an overall narrative.
Damn.
My joke aside, very, very well thought out and written response.
One of the best responses we've gotten here. I like it. At Capacity.
I've got 2 characters running that I think are in the midst of really solid runs, but I have a handful of concepts I'd like to devote some serious time towards someday. So I guess what's stopping me is time.
Solid prediction, Brian.
Yep.
At Ernest Saves E-Wrestling, next week's guest on the EFED podcast.
All my secondary characters could use a good run. Dover by a train. What's stopping me is a lack of train availability in this hobby. You know what? He brings up a good point that's not addressed enough on this show.
There's not a lot of trains in the hobby.
There's not a lot of trains.
I know of a bus you can use.
There is a bus. There is a bus.
At MDG Warren, Modern Day Gladiators.
What's up, Warren? I have one that I put in defiance. Only thing stopping me is the eventuality of the storyline I want to tell. But I also have the LE in the RWR, and they just debuted on 1/22/21. That'd be January 22nd, 2021.
Nice. Just last week as we're recording this.
Exactly.
So that's
Lunar
Warren's,
Express, if I'm not mistaken, LE.
Warren's first foray into a COFED or a Fire Pro Fed.
Very nice. Branching out. You can teach an old Warren new tricks.
An old Warren. I like that. At Mikey with a hard D. That's me.
I don't know if I have one that deserves a good run, but people seem to like the Dibbins. Maybe that tag team should have another go. What's stopping me? Question mark? Time.
Yes. The ever popular time answer. Great excuse.
We probably should have had you read your answer.
Probably. That's okay. Moving forward. At God of How.
I deserve nothing, even with my primary.
Who is now blind because he's been beaten too many times. At Seth is Burns.
I have several.
No doubt.
Come on, man. It's the best word you can come up with. Several.
Undersell.
I have several, but I think notably Bantam Ryan Batts. He
Yes.
is being used more, but a combo of time and running too many characters, there you go, simultaneously will do that. Mainly the latter.
Mainly the latter. Agreed.
There are a lot of ladder matches. That's what he means, right?
Yeah, not enough ladders or trains in this hobby.
It really is a shortage of both. Maybe we need to get a train to bring more ladders.
A ladder train. I like it. At that masked guy.
Probably Eli Buchanan's younger sister, Holly. She's kind of fallen to the wayside as I've concentrated more and more on Eli's story in my other writings. I'm not sure at this point in my life that I have enough energy to give her the attention as a character she truly would deserve without putting someone else away.
It makes sense. It's tough to put your primary character away for a secondary sometimes.
100%. And he also could have just said time.
And if you're like me, I have a hard time handling more than one or two characters at a time because I can't write that many separate personalities without eventually blending them all together.
Yeah, that's when you just give one a language barrier.
An accent. Yeah. Dibbins. Fair enough. All right, Brian, that's it for our Efed podcast question of the week this week. Thank you guys for answering. Check us out on Twitter at the Efed Podcast, on Facebook at the Efed Podcast, and of course on our Discord. That's where you can hang out, talk with us, and you can answer the question of the week that's pinned to the top of the profile on Twitter. All right, it's time for the Spotlight segment. This is where we highlight a Fed that's out there, tell you a little bit about them, and see if they are a good fit for you and you want to check them out. Brian, today we're taking a look at Project Honor. They're a returning Fed from Season 1, and we're going to talk about them again here today and see if there aren't any other people out there looking for somewhere else to join.
Very nice.
So you can find Project Honor on Twitter at Project Honor 20. You can find them online at projecthonor.proboards.com.
How, in fact, does this Fed, Project Honor, operate?
Brian, they are a competitive role-play Fed with the support of a large writing staff. They have storylines and rely heavily on them, but they also make alternative paths depending on the winner of each match.
So how often are there shows and or pay-per-views?
They have bi-weekly shows, and the pay-per-views go every other month. It's a nice, easy schedule for people.
It's a nice, breezy, easy schedule. So rules and word limits is big. What are their rules and word limits?
They're a one role play, no word limit Fed. So whether you write 1,000 words or 10,000 words, Project Honor is worth being checked out. And you can check out their full list of rules over at projecthonor.proboards.com. They call it the Code of Honor, actually.
Very nice. Branding. So basically, one role play, you better just get your shit in.
Get all your shit in. You got one shot. I like it.
So I see they have 8 active championships, and that's fantastic. What are some of the championships?
So they got a lot of championships, but they've got different brands, if I understand it right. They've got the Proving Ground brand with the Grand Championship, the X Factor Championship, and a Warrior Rising Championship. And then they've got the Fallout brand. It's got a Prime Championship, a Noble Championship, and an Ascension Champion. And then finally, the Interbrand. Oh, I'm sorry. There's 2 brands, and then the Interbrand Championships, the Legacy Championship, and the Tag Team. Of course, your tag team's got to jump around.
Obviously.
Yeah, so you can find them online, again, at Project Honor 20 if you're looking for a good competitive roleplay Fed. Online at projecthonor.proboards.com. Check them out. They have been a great addition to our community over in the Discord. Good guys. I've been in their Discord as well, and they're a fun group. We mentioned earlier you can check out their t-shirt at ewts.com. Project Honor. They got a cool design that Brian cooked up himself.
Very handsome design, if I may say so myself.
So check it out. It's really cool. I enjoyed working with those guys. They were super easy to work with. It's been a fun relationship. So check out Project Honor at projecthonor.proboards.com and at Project Honor 20 on the Twitter machine. And as far as what sets them apart, Brian, they not only do they have a roster that's enormous at this point, almost like the Defiance roster.
48 members.
48 members. That's awesome. I love to see that. It's a very healthy community. But not only that, but what sets them apart is the creative of their team, not only in the graphics department, the staff, but also their handlers. Their match rating and results setup is different than most. They are also a graphics-heavy Fed, and they do match picks for every single show, along with all over the forum. Check them out. Graphics-heavy Fed, great roleplay Fed, projecthonor.proboards.com.
Hey, this is Lee Best, God of HO Wrestling. You're listening to the Efed Podcast. Tune in.
All right, breaking news on the Efed front.
Ooh.
We heard from Meg this week, Brian. 5B Wrestling, that's Five Boroughs Wrestling. You can check them over at 5bwrestling.com. And you can check out their merch over at efedtees.com/5BW.
5BW. And or 5BW.efedtees.com.
Perfect. You love to see it, Christy.
You love it.
What breaking news in memoriam of Megan's recently passed grandfather. They're going to hold their show on February 12th. It's going to be a memorial show. So people have been asking her about that. It's going to be on February the 12th. And not only that, Brian, this year's tournament is going to be renamed the Budge Cup in honor of her grandfather.
Very nice.
Very nice. So the Captain's Cup will be renamed the Budge Cup, and it will be starting in April and ending in June. So if you want to get in on the action of a great angle fed, check them over at 5bwrestling.com.
100%. Loving memorial. How could you not like that?
That's right. It's a great cause, and anybody who can use e-wrestling as a release for their real life, it's a great opportunity, and I applaud that very much.
We're all for it.
So guys, check out 5bwrestling.com. Check out Meg on Twitter at Burrows5. Hey everybody, welcome back to another edition of the Efed Podcast interview series. We're back for season 2, episode 2. And today on the show we've got Mel. Mel is the handler, or was the handler, of Jessica Matthews, formerly of Hybrid. Mel, how you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. How about you, Mikey?
I'm doing pretty well myself. I'm glad to have you on finally. It's been a while, and we get more of the female contingent on the show. I'm excited about that.
Yeah. Oh, I'm excited.
Did you have a great New Year?
I did, actually. Very good one.
Good. Glad to hear that. And let's go ahead and get kicked off with the interview then. You recently retired from e-fedding.
That is correct.
What's that like for everybody who can't give it up?
I mean, technically speaking, it wasn't my first retirement attempt, that's for sure. But I have a very strong feeling that this will be the permanent one for sure.
We have a good career to cover then. So let's start at the beginning. How did you get into professional wrestling? When did you become a fan?
Funny enough, that started, I believe, in 1995, the WWF Royal Rumble. My older brother and my father were both watching it in the living room. And I just kind of, 1995, I was like 8 or 9.
Okay.
So I was pretty young. But I was intuitive, and when I was growing up, I had more kind of like a tomboyish side.
Sure.
I've noticed. So I was like, oh, there's these men doing things. Okay, that's interesting. Let me go sit down and watch. So I decided to sit down with them, and immediately I just, for whatever reason, I guess I still had kind of a girly side. So I fell in love with Triple H, Hunter Hearst Helmsley.
Nice.
And I believe he was not. He had the personality before the game era had started. Remember when he was wearing his tuxes?
Oh yeah, this is the Greenwich snob, Hunter Hearst Helmsley. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I believe, if memory serves, he was the first person to enter the Royal Rumble that year.
It's great stuff. The Royal Rumble is my favorite event of all time. I watch it every year. I can't miss it. Someday I got to get there and see one live. But that's great. Triple H was your favorite back when he was straight up Hunter Hearst Helmsley. And other than Triple H, who caught your eye?
The Rock.
Yeah.
The Rock. And as I started to just kind of watch all these different people, all these different, quote unquote characters, because I was so into fiction growing up and writing about, like fantasy and make believe and things like that. I'm like, oh, these people, I literally bought them as they're actual this is their real persona for some reason. Because I was a kid. I was 8,
You
8
believe
or
it.
9, and it's just like, oh, I was just like, oh, I really like these people. But whenever they turned, heel, I was like, oh, boo, how dare you? And then it kind of flips, and it was a really fun adventure. And then
Kane is really burnt under all those clothes.
that's what I thought. I was so into the fantasy fictional part of wrestling. I was just like, oh my god, this and that, and it was one of the biggest things that always sparked my creativity too.
That's awesome. So you became a fan of wrestling pretty quick and pretty young, and you were into it for quite some time then. When did you, are you still watching today?
I haven't for the past few years, actually. Mostly because I've just fallen behind when it comes to watching things long term. If it doesn't have, I don't know, sometimes I kind of just lose focus on it and jump to something else. For example, for example, when The Walking Dead first came out, and I was really into that in the beginning, but then I fell so far behind that I was like, oh, I can't catch up. I don't want to. I'm out of it now. Mm-hmm. So it's like I've fallen behind. Like the very last time I watched a wrestling show was the NXT episode where Finn Balor, or Prince Devitt, as we know, as I personally first found him, faced off against Shinsuke Nakamura the very first time the two of them faced in NXT. And that was awesome. I believe that was back in 2016 or 15. That's how long I've been behind.
That's okay. I mean, I haven't been watching professional wrestling since probably 2012, so I'm right there with you. I watch pieces here and there and whatever interests me, but when it comes down to watching episodic television, it's tough these days.
Yeah, it's tough. We don't even have a cable here at the house, so.
No, I think most people have moved past cable, and the ones who haven't, I'm glad they still get the opportunity. But it's harder to access, but I guess it's also easier. There are other methods, Hulu and the network and things like that. But it's interesting how that changed, because back in the day that was appointment television every Monday or every Thursday.
Yep, Monday Night Raw, Thursday Night SmackDown, when it first became a reality thanks to The Rock.
There you go. Your guy.
And then just everything kind of going from there.
So how did you find the weird world of Efeding?
Oh, that was in my late high school year, in my senior year, back in November 2005.
Okay.
Funny enough, it was actually on the same day as my mom's birthday. So kind of like a weird, strange thing going on. But at that time, around 2005, was the big thing coming out of TNA, Total Nonstop Action. And I fell in love instantaneously with their program. And I think I started watching in 2004, 2005. And I was really, really into it, especially the X division.
Yeah.
AJ Styles, Christopher Daniels, Chris Sabin, Petey Williams. I was like, what? The Canadian Destroyer was like, oh my God, what?
He just broke his neck, yeah.
About that division, yeah. It really, really sparked me. And then I signed up for and I was like, oh, this is really cool. I like this. I get to finally communicate with other people about all this is just watching. And I noticed, I was like, I wonder, kind of like a writing section, for creative writing, fiction writing, things. I was always writing a lot of fiction, fan fiction, short stories, anything like that. One of my favorite things that I've done in my life. And coincidentally enough, there was a section on that website called Studio 21. And I looked it over when one of the, it's been so long, I believe it was the Efed themselves who approached and said, hey, you were asking about like a writing section for this forum. Well, here's this one. I looked it over and I was perfect. I was like, all right, I'm gung ho. Let's go. And it's, again, same day as my mom's birthday. And I was just like, all right, let's see what happens. and then it just went from there. There's a lot. It's 15 years.
That's crazy.
Of an on and off Efed career for me.
That's an interesting way to find it, though, through a TNA forum. That's the first time I've heard that one. I do remember those days. I remember watching those not internet pay-per-views, but the weekly pay-per-views and different things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And what a great time for wrestling back when TNA was just branching out.
Oh, yeah. It was beautiful. I was just so in touch with everything. And yes, at that point, obviously being a little older and whatnot, I was like, all right, yeah, they're actually not like this in real life all the time. You know, it's character, but that's the cool part. You know,
Yeah.
They portray these characters, and I'm like, I want to portray a character. I want to do that.
And so you found it, and you got started. And what was it? Was it like a role play fed?
It was, yeah. I started way back with RP feds for many, many years. I was in RP feds. Never even knew the existence of angle feds until literally, I think, 5 years ago or 6 years ago.
I think that's when they became much more prevalent. That seems to be the case with most people I talk to. So you started in roleplay feds, and what was your first character? Did you play as a TNA character, or did you start with a created character?
No, that was the open choice back then. Like you could actually eat your own character, or you could play as one of the canon characters like Petey Williams or AJ Styles, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
But as I was, before I joined, I was reading a lot of these like these role plays, and I'm like, oh man, some of these people portray the characters that I love so well. I'm really intimidated. So I'm like, I don't know if I want to do that approach. I'm only 17 at the time, just barely turning 18 in December. I'm like, okay, no, I got to start small. I got to start with my own character.
Mm-hmm.
So, because I was such a wrestling fanatic at that time, and I was in high school still, so I wasn't mature. I had the quote unquote dream, a dream that I was like, that I look back now and I say, how did I even ever consider doing that? I had the dream back then of actually wanting to be a wrestler myself.
Sure.
So I created my first ever character, who went by Athena.
Went by what? I'm sorry?
That character. Her name was Athena.
Athena.
After the goddess.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And what kind of gimmick did your character have right off the bat?
It's hilarious because no matter how much I try to keep moving forward, when I think about that character, I'm like, oh Jesus Christ, this is an embodiment of just crap. But again, I was a kid, so she was very emo, and and she went on to proclaim herself as a bounty hunter or a trophy hunter.
Nice.
And yeah, she's nuts. But I was just so out there with my imagination back then. I was so into it because back then I really wanted to be a wrestler at the time.
That's a great thing, though.
Yeah.
You started with Athena and you created this character who was an emo bounty hunter, which is awesome in its own right. Moving on from there, and how did you do as far as success?
And her real name was actually my real name.
Oh, there you go. You did the old use your real name in e-fetting trick.
Yeah, because there are some people out there who actually use their names as characters too.
So many people.
Yeah, exactly. So I was like, what's so wrong about that? But I wanted to be like, no, she's going to be an emo goddess, bounty hunter, who, okay, this is going to sound so stupid, but it's true, and I'm not going to deny it. She developed a crush on Samoa Joe and Petey Williams.
Nice.
So, but then things came along, and then eventually, a couple months later or so, she met a new friend named Nick Zero, and the handler, if he were to hear this, would be like, "Oh God, don't call me out on this."
That's the stuff we like to hear.
Yeah, first character, man. She was wild, very, very wild. But how can you get better at something if you don't try it out first?
That's exactly right. And how did you do to start? Were you as bad as as most people are when they kick it off?
Oh yeah. uh, oh my goodness. The first, like, the thing that was more intimidating than anything, it wasn't the character development. I could do that easily. I was writing for since fifth grade.
Yeah.
But when it came to writing the on camera trash talk, that was the stuff that I was like, oh, this is different. And then I just was like, okay, just go with the punches, go roll with it, go with it. And it was just ridiculous, and she was silly and just very childish. But again, she was based on me, so she was at around the same age. I just made her a year older because I was 17 at the time.
Sure. And so you make this character, and it's a reflection of yourself, which is exactly what wrestling should be.
Yeah.
How did you do? I mean, obviously you said you weren't great in the beginning. Did you achieve any success in this beginning Fed, or did you have to move on before you started seeing wins?
I don't remember her record exactly, because at a certain point I was like, oh, the records aren't going to really matter. It's all about just having fun. So
Sure.
I focused more on that. She did get in the Studio 21. She did become the television champion.
There you go.
And held it, I believe, for, I can't remember, at least 2 defenses before she lost it. So hey,
that's a good accomplishment for a beginning.
yeah,
Not
bad. I was like, oh hey, and it was only a few months later. I'm like, all right, I'm getting the hang of this. I got this.
Hello. So you were talking about how your character development was your strong suit when it came to e-wrestling early on. How did that change over time, or did it change? Or do you still consider it your strong suit today?
Nope, it has never changed. It is still my strongest suit. On camera, I praise the people who can do it so well. Like, I mean, maybe I'm being modest, because I was in RP Feds and I did win championships in RP Feds. So there must have been some kind of skill and merit with my on-camera writing. But the more successful character that started to get this kind of clout was my second ever character.
Okay, and who was that?
Her name is Zaria Lynette, aka the Rainbow Angel. Her Twitter is at Rainbow Angel 86, I believe, off the top of my head.
Nice. There's a nice little shout out at Rainbow Angel 86.
Mm-hmm. She was my second ever character, who I created back in January 2007. So at that point, from the start in November 2005 was about almost a kind of a year and a half after.
That's when you made the switch and went to a second character.
Mm-hmm.
And
some controversy happened with that first Fed that made me leave. And I just kept going with this character, with Zaria instead.
It's a nice time to break and start a new character is when you leave one place and go to another. With the new character, where did you go?
I went to a fun RP Fed called Legacy Wrestling Alliance, LWA, run by there's some light and darkness with this Fed, that's for sure. But at the time when I had first come to know him in January, he was a great guy, Let's see, by timeline, I left Studio 21, I believe, in either March or April 2007. So I had already gotten 3 to 4 months in LWA simultaneously.
Okay. So you were writing 2 characters at the same time?
Yes, in 2 different Feds. That's correct.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, that's a tough obstacle to tackle so early on in the EFED career.
Well, at the time, I had graduated from high school in 2006, and I had taken the rest of 2006 off, kind of to give myself a reprieve from school because it was so stressful for me at the time. I almost didn't graduate, actually. Fun fact. So after that, after I worked so hard and had to double time and everything on my schoolwork and everything, you know, I was like, I graduated, I'm good. I kind of want to take a break before I go into college, you know? So I took half the year and then I went back into college at the same time that I created Zarya and put her into this second Fed. So at this time, I had a lot of free time in a way.
When you were writing both characters at the same time.
Yes, Athena and Zarya, yes.
Well, if there's one thing every E-Feder out there knows, this is a great way to fill that time.
That's true.
So you're writing the two characters in two different RP feds, and talk about how you maintain two separate characters.
If I recall correctly, I believe neither of them were bi-weekly, so both of them were weekly RP feds, and at the time, I just had so much free time, and even when I was taking college classes, I still had some time management, quote unquote, to be able to balance my homework and my e-fedding life. So, I mean, it was a little tough at first, but then I picked it up and I'm like, I'm dedicated. I'm motivated. Let's go, you know?
And when you're writing both of them, how do you keep the personalities different? I think a lot of people fall into writing a similar character.
Well, as Athena, who eventually started to switch over and I think at the time started to reveal her real name instead of using her nickname instead. I at the time I was like, if I'm going to do a different character, a second character, I want her to be completely different from me. I want her in some ways a little similar, but have a nice contrast. So, strangely enough, at that time in January, what motivated me was I was watching Disney Channel's Phil of the Future, and of course fell in love with Alison Milshaka. And I looked at her and I'm like, she's so perky and bubbly and sweet and kind of weird and cute. And then it just kind of came into a vision, and I just started to design it out, color it out, and made this character who was bubbly, optimistic, schizophrenic, but very well-natured, but at the same time kind of oblivious to the real world and how it was.
A little naive.
Yes, very much so. Very, very much so, at least until she entered into wrestling. But that was because when she first came to America from Paris, she was, I believe, 18, 19 at the time, and she was taken in by a very kind dojo master, with his adopted, 2 children, and obviously they were wrestling fans, and she got into it too, and she started training with them and being like, maybe I can do this too. Not realizing the dark sides of the wrestling industry, as we know.
Very much so. That's an interesting way for a character to get into it.
Mm-hmm.
Almost like a foreign exchange situation.
Exactly.
So you're writing these two characters early on, you're having a little bit of success. When do you really take off in what you would call your e-wrestling career?
The Zarya character. At that point with Athena, or my own name, I was just kind of faltering with her.
Okay.
So I was like, you know what? Despite the controversy that happened at Studio 21, I want to finish with this character and give her a happy ending, you know? So I believe in November 2007 was when I finally finished writing the Athena character, and that way I could focus completely on Zarya. But before that happened, in April 2007, I was a part of LWA for 4 months, and that wasn't the first title that I won with her. It was the second one that I won with her. The first one was called the LWA Crossfire Division Championship. That was won, I believe, in February or March. And Zarya was literally a rookie who managed to do this. And it was a really cool accomplishment because it was an RP Fed. And I'm like, can I do it? Can I do it with this character? And I pulled it off with her. Not once, but twice. in April 2007 with a battle royal, basically up against every single character, every single handler in the Fed.
It's nice to know
Who
you're
does the best?
not locked into one character. You can write more than one and be successful.
That's correct. I was very surprised at that time. I had no idea that there was even a battle royal that was going to happen. Zarya was originally just going to be facing, good Lord, if I remember their names, Riley Winters and CM Virus, with her tag team partner, James Dean, as the Street Angels. And I thought originally that it was just going to be that match. But apparently the Fed had pulled off a plot twist and had booked a surprise battle royal for the main event. And the way that the Fed had judged this, along with the staff that he had, was gather every single RP that everybody wrote for their original matches and find the best one.
Interesting.
And thus, somehow, some way, they believed that I had the best RP to win the LWA Undisputed Championship. My first world title.
Going into the match, you didn't even know the match was happening.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
I was like, the moment they showed it and I read it every word for word, all of a sudden, I was like, wait a minute. We're having a battle. What? We're having a battle. No, get out. And I just kept reading the whole show. I was hooked. And then I got to it and I'm like, there's no way. This is every single character in this Fed. But somehow, some way, she did it. Zarya did it. She was the last one standing. And the runner-up was CM Virus, who at the time was one of her big rivals in that Fed.
It's a great story to tell in a roleplay Fed.
It's crazy. He and Riley Winters had won the tag team match, right? So I was like, no way. But then somehow, even with all the role plays that we wrote for that tag match, they still found and believed that one of the ones that I wrote with Zarya was the top.
Diamond in the rough.
I was in tears. I won't lie. I was in tears when I finished reading it. I was like, what? Get out of here. No way. Oh my God. And just, it was such a bright day in my Efed career.
I miss that. I miss reading results and just the anxiety and the anticipation, and everybody just scrolls to the end now. So it's
or they do the control find, and they just look for their characters and what their characters did. And I'm like, no, guys, it's not the point. Like when you're watching, like back then, when you were watching TNA or WWF or WWE, you'd watch the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was that draw, it was that pull. You'd want to be there for every story.
And when it all comes back around, it's even more exciting for you.
Exactly. That's how it was. And I was just like, it was just one of the best things,
You achieved the top championship in this Fed early on in your EFED career. How many more times did you accomplish it?
I did it 3 more times. 3 characters, too. 3 different characters. 3 different top titles.
So 3 titles total or 4?
No, twice. No. Oh my God, I completely forgot. I completely forgot about 2015, 2016. No, I did it 4 times. Twice with Jessica. Once with Chelsea. Once with Danny. I remember now. Oh, so many characters.
And we'll get there.
By reference.
Go ahead.
Yeah. By reference, Jessica Sears back then, before she became Jessica Matthews, won the IPW Heavyweight Championship. That was a micro Fed, by the way. Much trickier than a regular RP Fed, in my opinion, because the word limit.
You got to say more with less.
Yep. That was Jessica's first ever top title. Let's see. And then it was a while before I would win another top title. And that would be, I believe, if my memory serves, very recently, 2019 in Empire Wrestling with Chelsea Price. And that was her first ever
top top
heavyweight
championship.
title.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then it's weird to say last year because we just went into 2021. But
in 2020, yeah,
I know, June 2020, Danny Anderson won her NFW World Heavyweight Championship. Yep.
Well, listen, it's no easy task to win a heavyweight championship, regardless of whether you're an Angle Fed or an RP Fed. But to do it with so many characters is a feat in itself, so be proud of that.
All things considered, though, some people might be like, but within 15 years, she only got so-and-so, like that, just that many. Like, it doesn't seem that impressive. But for me, as a storyteller, as a character developer, it was a pretty big deal.
All that matters is how you feel about it. No one else matters. So you've accomplished that much in the game. Let's talk about some of your other characters. After Azalea,
Sure.
Where'd you come from? Where'd you go next?
Let's see. With Zarya, I continued to write with her for quite a long time because she became a huge fan favorite. Not just for me, but for my fellow handlers as well. A lot of people loved her.
That's easy to happen in a home fed. It's fun.
It's my baby face. But let's see. Technically speaking, I had minor characters. When I say minor, because they didn't really have long careers or they were very short term. But I had other characters that I was dabbling with here and there, like Julio Ramirez. That might be a vaguely familiar name for some people. That guy was kind of crazy, but I loved him. But I had Julio Ramirez. I had like other characters, Darren Edwards, names that I can't remember anymore because they were so short term. But for long term characters, the next one that really came into like a bright, like, all right, this is pretty awesome thing was Chelsea Price, who debuted in Epic Wrestling Organization in September of 2008, at the same time that I was writing Zarya in that same Fed.
So this is the first time you've brought a second character in the same place?
Yes, in the same RP Fed.
Interesting.
And that in itself was a challenge, to be honest, because it was like, oh man, it's weekly too, so it was constant, like, write.
And you got two separate storylines going. You have two separate characters going, constantly trying to push each one up without sacrificing the other.
Correct. But I knew the well where, like, I didn't want to be selfish and have both of them going for the top title at the same time, for example. Or as like a standard of how some people would write, you either had a character going after a title or you had the other character, or you had a character going into like a story instead, a feud, for instance.
Mm-hmm. One that's not surrounded by a title.
Exactly. Things that were like, okay, well, this one can take a back burner to chill out, do some story and character development, and the other one focused more on chasing a title in a feud, etc.
That's a good way to look at it. You don't need to, quote unquote, hog the spotlight.
No, that wasn't the point for me. As fun as it was to win titles, the more important thing to me was writing my stories, writing and developing these characters and bringing them to life.
Going
that was
back
for me,
to the
in
character
my opinion,
development.
Yeah, that was always, because I became a writer. I decided I wanted to become a professional writer when I was in 5th grade. And ever since then, I was just creating characters and developing stories and things like that, even if they were out of this world like Athena was.
So you've touched on your third long-term character. How many are we talking? Looking back, how many would you say are your top main characters? Obviously, Jessica Matthews is a big one.
Oh, yeah. And surprisingly enough, her development of becoming a main character didn't start off like that. She didn't start off as a main character. She started off as a minor supporting character to Chelsea Price. She was one of the childhood friends of Chelsea's daughter, Rosalind Price.
Wow. That's big. That's big world building.
Yeah, I never would have thought when I first created her for this story, for this purpose. I was like, I don't think she's going to really go that far. She's like pretty timid, and it was such a diverse thing. And then all of a sudden, just as it went on, and I eventually stopped writing with Chelsea for a while, and kind of with Zarya to take some time off, in particular 2011, 2012. That was the first ever quote unquote retirement I took. So, but when I kind of came back, for which I never thought I was going to be honest, I came back, I believe, late 2012, bringing Chelsea back into the fray.
Okay.
In a place called Revival Wrestling, which, to be honest, I have some good memories, but more bad ones, to be honest.
Oof.
Yeah. I'll be honest. In my Efed career, I haven't always been the best person to deal with. And I made a lot of mistakes. A lot of them. Either by my oversensitivities to some things, or perhaps, doing things without thinking of the consequences ahead of time, or how it would affect other characters, or what would happen.
It's big of you to say.
Yeah, no, I won't lie. Again, I messed up a lot over the years with my characters or as myself. But if you don't make mistakes, you don't get the lessons, and you don't ever really learn. And over time, it took me a while, but I did. I worked on it, and I got better and better. And I'm not perfect, and that's okay. I'm me. I'm who I am. I'm who I want to be. But I learned from my mistakes and the flaws, and I worked on them through my characters, and I made them more quote unquote realistic as you can be in an Efed world.
Certainly with character development.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, it took a while. And eventually, within the from 2012 to 2015, maybe a little earlier, maybe 2014, that's when I slowly but surely made the transition from RP feds only to angle feds.
Nice. And how did you make that, or what caught your eye, or what angle fed did you dabble in first?
Let's see.
And what made you do that?
Let's see. This is very, very specific. What was my first angle fed?
Sorry about that.
It's okay.
I'm still in my first angle fed 5 years later, so that's why I ask.
Yeah, no, because for the longest time, practically 9 to 10 years of my Efed career was in RP feds only. But then I think it was because IPW was a micro fed and GW was RP fed. It was SAP. It was Spirit and Pride. There we go. It was Spirit and Pride Wrestling. That's right. Created by the Fed head known as, let's see. Jake. His name was Jake. I don't know if I want to share his name like in public or his characters' names, but if people recognize that name, they know.
I think character name would be fine as long as you don't give the guy's real last name.
I don't know how to pronounce it. I don't know how to pronounce the surname that well because it's Russian, I believe, if I remember correctly. It's Thai. His character, oh my God. Prince something became Pharaoh. Wajetotep, there we go. Prince Wajetotep.
Oh, sure.
That's why I couldn't remember. I'm like, it's Russian, Egyptian, But yeah, his handler, he was the Fed head of SAP. First ever, well, actually, no, it started off as an RP.
And it moved to Angle.
Eventually transitioned into Angle. There we go.
That makes sense. That's an easy way to find yourself in an Angle fit.
Like, we're making that move. Okay, cool.
I guess I'll hang out with you guys and try this.
That's right. And that was I had to take a short break from Efeding for a while at the time because I was making a transitional move in my life. But when I came back into it, he was like, "Hey, I want you to come to SAP." And I'm like, all right, sure. Why not? And then it made that transition from RP to Angle as the time progressed. And then I was like, Angle? Like, oh, wait a minute. This is just focusing on
storytelling, character development.
Exactly. And I was like, oh my God, this is my element.
This is what I've been waiting for.
Yes. And then it was weird at first because I was like, wait a minute, you mean I don't have to write on camera shoot that I'm terrible at?
Perfect.
Yeah, it became that way. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. Why didn't we have this before? And then of course I realized, wait a minute, there have been angle feds slowly manifesting around that time. It started to become a big deal,
And then did you slowly make the transition full time to angle feds, or how does that work?
Oh yeah. No.
Yeah.
Once I started to experience what an angle fed was like,
Sayonara roleplay.
Yeah, I was like, no, guys, and I'm older at that point. Obviously, I'm an adult. I have real life responsibilities. Like we have 5 dogs here in my house, so I have real life things I need to work on. And I was like, no, I just want to focus on the character development, the storytelling, my element, my creativity. And that's when I was like, no, guys, I'm done with RP. I can't do it anymore. Don't ask me. Stop. I just want to write. I just want to focus on what I'm good at, and that's it.
That's terrific. And you found angle feds, and you found your love for angle feds. And based on what you said in the beginning, it makes perfect sense that you would find it and just commit to it because it encompasses everything you were looking for in the creative writing hobby.
Exactly. From the beginning. It kind of came full circle at that point.
It's weird how even Efeding can do that for you. They say life comes full circle, but Efeding comes full circle too.
Exactly.
So where's that bring us to now, Mel?
Let's see. Well, if my first angle fed was in 2016, the summer and the fall, so it was basically 4 years of having that kind of commitment. A little breaks here and there and whatnot, and switching characters. Like for example, you remember how I said Jessica started off as a minor support character for another main character?
Yep.
Eventually, I started working with Anglefed. I started working as Rosalind Price, Chelsea's daughter, who had turned like 18, and she decided to get into wrestling. But then I was like, I don't know. I'm not really comfortable about the pressure of writing a second generation wrestler, It kind of seems like it's a bit much, especially since Chelsea did accomplish quite a few championships in her early, quote, mid-career time before she took her break. But I wasn't finding any real quote unquote success with Rosalind. Like, don't get me wrong. I wrote really good stories with her. But
in a competitive setting, or no, at this point you're in an angle feds.
Yeah, it was like, I don't know. I'm not really sure how I feel about this. And I'm like, well, how do I start to make things change? And then I noticed as I wrote more CD pieces, I started to get Jessica in more on them. And I was like, she's kind of somebody that I really want to connect with more. She was like, Jessica is kind of started as like half of me and half not me, in a mixture of weird things and being a gamer, total nerd, just like me. But then I was like, okay, she's starting to become more prominent in Rosalind's pieces. And I was like, I kind of want to see what would happen if she was the wrestler instead. So the transition happened sometime in that era. No, it was KWI. Oh my God. All these memories are flooding into me at once. I'm like, geez, I'm just picking them off as I talk.
But it's
So
cool
yeah,
that a secondary character would come in as almost a bounce off character in your promos and your character development pieces, and eventually, as a writer, you just want to develop the characters in your story and the world that you're creating, and the character becomes more interesting to you than the character you originally were writing.
exactly. Which is the weirdest thing, and I'm like, but yeah, she became a more prominent character for me than Rosalind. I love Rosalind, don't get me wrong, but Jessica, I was like, she has some potential in her.
And that's the beauty of creative writing. You never know where you're going to end up.
Exactly. Like it's always so, if you're, as a writer, in my opinion, if you're not uncovering these surprises, it's like, well, then you're predicting everything that's happening. That's not fun, is it? But if you
No.
write something and you're like, wait a minute, this starts to become different. What if we do this? What if we do
Yes.
that? And it starts to stream out. It starts to blossom. And then Jessica, she blossomed. I was very surprised. And when I kicked her off on her wrestling career, it started off as, if I remember correctly, her best friend, Rosalind, and one of their closest friends, Les Grissom, if I pronounce that name correctly, were both viciously attacked by one of their worst rivals. And Jessica at that point felt so powerless. But instead of being shy and timid about it, suddenly she was like, no, I'm tired of this. I want to stand up for the people who've always stood up for me. Because growing up, she was bullied constantly. Being think about it, a girl into games back then, when in our childhood, that was crazy. Like I was picked on a lot because I was more tomboyish, because I wore jeans and pants more than I wore dresses, because I played video games more than some of the guys in my classes. And I was like, what if Jessica had that too? What if she was like me? But instead of fighting back like I did, she wouldn't. So for the longest time, her older brother, Zachary, Rosalind, and their other friends would protect Jessica all the time, to the point where at this peak, she was like, no, I'm tired of everybody protecting me, but I can't do that in return. And that inspired her mentor, the man who became her mentor, Jaime Alejandro, to become her mentor and to start training her. And that's when she started to become bigger and bigger. And despite some of the controversial storylines that were written at that character's early career, sometimes things don't start off great, but they can become good.
Absolutely.
And that's what happened.
It all depends on how you roll with the situation.
Mm-hmm. Like there were some things that I was like, I look back at it now, years later, and I'm like, oh Jesus, that was a stupid idea. that was a crazy thing to do. Like, oh God, honestly, like I did start to hate love triangles, because that was one of the things that Jessica was involved in. And nowadays I'm like, oh God, I really do hate those kinds of love-shaped stories, but with very few exceptions. But I do admit those ones were really bad with her. That's how come I was like, no, I don't want to put her through that no more. So I then just kind of balanced it out, and I was like, okay, this isn't going to work this way.
Breaking your own mold.
Exactly. I'm like, all right, I've had enough of this. Let's do something else. Let's try something else. As a writer, that's what you want to do. You want to try new things, to break out of the shell and to figure out, all right, what's going to be a better element for these characters. And I found that with Jessica. And she just kept growing, and she became a huge favorite, to the point that I was like, I think I like her more than Zarya. And I love Zarya to pieces. But yeah, Jessica became so big, like so popular, like so, like, it was crazy, despite all these flaws and whatnot. I was like, I love her, Maybe she is kind of like me in that total, like, nerdy way, but, like, still.
It was like you said, in our childhood, she would have been bullied. Today, she would be revered, so it's almost like she was just ahead of her time.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. based on my own personal experiences and the experiences of the people around me, being like, all right, I want to mold it like this. And besides, what good character doesn't have flaws?
Oh, they should. They should absolutely have flaws. You can't have a character without flaws, or else they're fictional.
The irony in that.
Yeah.
Wait, it's a fictional character. Oh, wait. But it made sense. And, trials and tribulations that I worked through all that, and I just kept writing. At that certain point, from Angle Feds on, I was like, I'm not, I may have some people who don't like me in this game, but I can't let them control my life. I can't let them bully me around. Like, I can't let my sensitivities be affected by people who I'll never meet more than likely ever.
Yes. Thank you.
Why would I allow it? If I allowed myself to succumb to those weaknesses, they would win.
Yes.
And what kind? Why? What's the point? There's no point.
I'm 100% on board with this. I'm on Team Mel. Let's get the billboards. Yeah, don't let anybody who you're never going to meet in real life, who's never going to affect your life, don't let them bother you mentally. Don't let them get under your skin, and don't let them affect your writing or your life unless that you care enough about them to do that.
Exactly. Like, the only people who should be affecting you from that far away should be people that are your friends or your family.
That's right.
That's it.
That's the moral of this podcast.
There you go. But that's finally when I was like, I'm going to let it go. Anybody that starts to bother me, mute, block, unfollow, who cares?
Yes.
If they decide to screenshot and start crying about it, it's like, okay, guess what? You're living rent-free in their head.
Yep.
They can't move on. They're the ones that are stuck in the dark.
It's a beautiful
while
thing.
You continue on.
And keep growing.
Exactly. Took me a long time to get to that point. Again, it took me 10 years to finally stop letting people manipulate me like that. I'm not perfect, and I've made my mistakes. I will admit to all of them. I will. But I'm not going to let those people bother me anymore. There's no point. They can't hurt me. Ever.
You got it. So where are we at now on your journey?
Well, like I said, I did make that a decision to retire.
Yes.
Because, in all honesty, I'm like, 15 years. I've been doing this for 15 years. Collaborating, creatively writing. I knew as I grew older and I did this more and more, I'm like, I love doing this. I want to be a writer. a writer. I want to be a professional writer. I want to go out there and publish novels, poetry, prose, short stories, all of it. This is my passion. This is the thing that, out of everything that I've done in my life, creative writing is the best thing to me, in my opinion. It's the way that I express myself. It's therapeutic for me. It's everything I want to do for the rest of my life. And even if I have to resort to speech-to-text methods, I'll do it. As long as I can continue to unveil and completely unleash my creativity. That's all that matters. And I knew at that point, ever since 5th grade, I'm like, I do want to be a writer for the rest of my life. And now it's like, I'm finally at a point where I feel so confident in myself. 33 years old, imagine. But this is it. I'm not going to be able to publish Efed works. I can't do that. I can't. I have to start stemming on my own to become my own writer and to create my characters, create my stories, my worlds, and open up to the endless possibilities that I have. And I can't do that with Efedding. As much as I want to, believe me, I have to be able to just let that go so I can pursue my dream, my career at last. To go back to school and to publish myself.
You're pouring your creative writing time into Efedding when you should be pouring it into something that you not only would benefit more from, but that you may enjoy more.
Exactly.
It's hard
And
to
like
argue.
even
That's a great outlook and a great way to step away.
yeah, because if I keep doing this Efed thing, when am I going to be able to have time to focus on my own worlds, my own characters, my own stories, and publish them, get them out into the world, have people read them, whether it's my family or my friends, start off small, and then it grows from there. That's what I want. And now I have the confidence to be able to move on from this game to now be able to do this for my reality.
That's commendable, and I'm glad to see you're doing it. I hope you do well, and we obviously wish you all the success in the world in that, because we hate to see people leave the game, but when they do, if it's for the right reason, then obviously you're happy to see them go.
Yeah, it was long decided. I believe it was, well, last year, quote unquote, 2020. That was one of the hardest years of my life. E-fedding was starting for me to just stammer off. I was losing that passion, that motivation, because I was like, I want to do something else with my life instead. And there was a point where, yeah, I was like, oh man, do I just quit here straight up? But I'm like, no, I want to be able to finish these stories at least with my characters. And the ones that I have active at the time were Jessica Matthews, Danny Anderson, and Remy Fontaine. And I was like, I'm going to make the decision right here and now. Let's conclude their stories one way or another. And then I have that peace, that closure, because this is what I wanted to do for me. But that doesn't mean it's the end of those characters.
No.
In fact, who knows? In the future, you might find them in an actual book.
That'd be awesome.
That's my hope.
Well,
That's my dream.
Very good, Mel. Before I let you go, we do have a couple questions from the community, if you'd be happy to answer them.
Absolutely.
All right, we do have some jokesters in the crowd, so be ready for those. Up first,
Oh, no.
Alias with a soft D but with a hard G. Bang, marry, kill. Ross, Chandler, and Joey. The characters, not the actors.
What? Say those names again?
Ross, Chandler, and Joey from Friends. The characters, not the actors.
Oh. Confession. I've never watched Friends.
Oh, Alias. Sorry, buddy.
I am so sorry. I see glimmers here and there, but I wasn't really into those shows growing up. So
You were playing video games. What the hell?
I was playing video games and watching anime and getting into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, being an absolute nerd that I am. So I was more into the, fiction, fantasy, science fiction, sci-fi, things like that.
All right.
I'm so sorry.
Up next is Cat Passidy. He's got an interesting one. I'll let you pick two characters on this one.
Okay.
If your character was elected president of the United States, what would be the first executive order they would make?
Jesus. That's a good one.
I love that question.
That's a good one. Yeah. Well, let's see. If I could only pick two, one of the ones I would pick is Jessica Matthews. Her first order, let's see. Well, oh my God, I don't. Oh, that's a lot to think about.
It is.
That's a lot. Well, as a true devoted nerd, and in a reference to one of my favorite anime of all time, the first thing she would be devoted to is for love and peace. Love and peace.
There you go.
If you get that reference, please let me know.
There you go. Love and peace for Jessica Matthews. So that's good.
And for Danny Anderson, the first thing that she would want to do is she'd want to provide all the help in the world for mental health.
Beautiful.
That would be like, because she herself, she has her mental health conditions. She has ADHD. She was born with autism spectrum disorder, and she recently was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. She's the kind of character that she is. She's always been really devoted into helping those that are just like her, and obviously when she became a wrestler herself, she was like, I want to do this for the people who think that they can't because of their disabilities, quote unquote. No, don't ever let that slow you down. Do it. If this is what you love to do, whether it's wrestling or any other career you want to take on, just because you have disabilities doesn't mean that should stop you. You go for it. And she did. She became a champion 3 times in her career, short as it was.
It's a hell of accomplishment.
Yeah, so the first thing she would do as president is to literally just reach out and help the people that, like world mental health,
I like it. Both noble conquests from each character.
I think so.
Up next is John Thompson at TW Combat. What do you consider your greatest accomplishment in the hobby?
The greatest one ever?
Yes.
Without a doubt, in my opinion, it has to literally be Saria Lynette's LWA Undisputed Championship win.
The first one.
Yep. Because it was an RP Fed. And it was so out of left field. Nobody saw it coming. None of us. It was the craziest plot twist I'd ever seen. One of the most craziest, because there's been a lot of stories that I've had my characters involved in, but that one leaves the mark because it was the first one.
It's hard to argue the first title, the first big title.
Exactly. It was so interesting because, I remember one of the controversial things in Studio 21, unfortunately, was I could never, my writing skill could never hit above a certain score. I could never get above, I think it was a 25 or a 26, maybe 27 out of 30. I could never reach world title level scores in my RPs. And it was one of the things that I'm like, what the heck? I was always so frustrated with it back then, to be honest. It was just, I was very just like, why do I have this barricade, I couldn't even get into because it was Studio 21, I couldn't even get an X Division title match, only the television. I could never get above that division, and I'm like, this is stupid. I'm better than this. I know I am. But I guess at the time, the judges, as synonymous as they were in the Fed head, didn't really think I was there yet. And it was frustrating, and it was angry. And then the big controversial thing that made me leave the Fed at that time was just that was the thing that made me go, I'm done with this. I can't stand that. That's bull, Not only was the constant, why can't I ever break this glass ceiling, but the fact that another handler was like, oh, you copied my character in a different Fed. Zarya being the quote-unquote copy, which she wasn't. And it was like the whole thing was just so frustrating. I'm like, are you serious? You're going to start to accuse, original characters. But no character is 100% original. There's always going to be some different inspirations. And that was just the most frustrating thing. And then I was like, no, I'm going to stick to LWA, just with Zarya. Screw them. I'm going to prove them wrong. I'm going to prove myself right, that I can be among the best. And again, that first world title win with Zarya, boom, I knew that I was a great writer. I knew that I had that heart for it. And I proved it with a character, quote unquote, that was a vampire, a blight. It's like, hey, guess what, guys? You judged wrong. You shouldn't have judged. You shouldn't have accused. It's on you. And then from then on, it was just, no matter what, I always go back to that first one. That's the biggest one.
What's the most disappointing moment?
Disappointing in my whole career?
Yep.
Let's see. That's a lot because there's a lot of disappointments. Not even gonna lie about it. Oh man. Let's see. If I had to pick biggest disappointment, it was partially my own fault, and I will admit to that. But then it was partially the fault of the other handler in question, whom I will not name for reasons. But Chelsea Price. There was to a point where that character became so bad to so many other handlers because of this influence, because of this controversy. And it was partially my fault. I take full responsibility because that was still at a time that I was still sensitive, very sensitive, to the negative influence of others. But it was such a bad time because I really wanted to kill that character. And I mean kill that character. That's how bad that she had fallen.
Wow.
It was really bad. It was this handler's fault as well. And I won't go into detail about it. But yeah, no. I really wanted to kill this character and I wanted to quit straight up. I was that frustrated. I was at that extreme. And again, I do accept my own fault too, because I was still allowing people to negatively influence me. I was still being too sensitive and being too attached to my characters. I won't lie about that, but But then I was like, somehow, some way, I kept powering through. But that one, biggest disappointment out of all 15 years. The fact that I stooped that low.
Last question from John. Do you enjoy Elvis Presley music? I know I do. It's full of hunka hunka burnin' love.
Despite certain things, yeah, absolutely. I enjoy a lot of various types of genres of music, including Elvis Presley. Absolutely.
Is Elvis a genre? I would think so.
Should be. Same with Bob Marley, right?
There you go.
But I love all sorts of genres of music. So yeah, absolutely.
At Rivs, who's going over?
At Rivs? What's that?
At Rivs, that's his username.
Okay.
RIVS. His question is, who's going over?
In terms of my characters?
I guess.
Oh, if I'm gonna
put all your characters in a battle royal. Who's going over?
Oh, okay. Whew. Out of all of them, the most realistic one to go over would be Zarya.
There you have
Zarya.
it.
She has the most experience. She's a badass, and despite her happy-go-lucky, optimistic schizophrenia. But yeah, schizophrenia. I'm getting them mixed up. But either way, yeah, no, she would. Realistically, if I could choose, like in a fun fantasy way, like, if I didn't have to lean on realism, I would choose Danny Anderson.
There you go. Up next and finally from our community is Meg. First, Meg says, before I forget, thank you for being a part of the Captain's Cup in 5BW. Darien versus Chelsea was a lit match.
Oh, I did read that one, and I want to thank you and apologize at the same time for suddenly leaving afterwards. At the time, that was, again, around 2020, right? Last year, and that was to a point where I was really, really faltering with my Efed career and being like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore. I'm not motivated. I don't want to do any kind of activity, or even if it was just an angle fed. So I kind of, in a way, dropped off without saying anything. But I do thank you for, for somehow in your creative decision to allow Chelsea to get to that final. I really do appreciate that. Thank you. And I apologize again.
Since you've retired, what's one thing you will reflect on during your time in the game?
One thing I want to reflect on is all the friends that I've made.
Yes.
I love them. Personal shout outs. Jesus, there's too many. too many to name. I love you guys. Each and every one of you guys know who you are. I can't thank you guys enough, especially with what happened last year in March. That was such a big thing that happened in my real life. If anybody wants to talk about it, I mean, I'm open. But suffice to say, yeah, even after all that, even after the aftermath of the incident that happened in March, the people that have stuck with me through all this time, ever since then, and even longer, anything, I appreciate you guys. I love you guys. I'm gonna miss collaborations, but hey, I mean, if you let me know ahead of time, I'm still available for creative writing. And get this, I will not say no to a guest appearance once in a while on a special occasion.
I knew you weren't too retired.
I'm not like, okay, there's 12% of, hey, I'm willing to guest star, you know.
There you
but
go.
Beyond that.
Last question from Meg. What advice would you give someone who is coming up in the game today?
A newcomer that comes up, like, for example, let's see.
Figure a new angle fetter. What kind of advice would you give them?
So, okay. Yeah, okay. The first thing I want to say is just do what makes you the happiest. This is your character that you're writing. Your influence, your decisions, they come first. Regardless of how other people feel, whether it's your friends, your family, or, you know, the people that are trying to push it in a negative arc, don't let that pressure get to you. This is your creativity, your decision. You do what you believe is right in your heart. You follow your heart. But don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be like me when I started off. I was stubborn. Ask for help. There's nothing wrong with asking for help. It's not a weakness. It's not a weakness. But yeah.
It's good advice. So I would say definitely just roll with whatever you have fun with. There's no wrong way to say that.
Just do what you believe in. Follow your heart. I wish I would have done that a long time ago.
Well, today you did great, Mel. I appreciate you coming on for the interview. We really appreciate you taking the time. Before I let you go, is there anybody else you want to shout out to? Any links you want to drop? Any ats on the Twitter machine?
Well, let's see. The last Hybrid Wrestling is closed. It did close on December 27th, 2020. God bless that Fed. God, I guess, in terms of Efed and in terms of friends, a big, big shout out to Chris and Shane. And they know who they are. Dean Matthews and Damon Cross, the handlers for them respectively. They started off to me as Fed heads, but the more important thing is they became two of the closest friends that I've had in this whole career of mine.
That's incredible. It's great that you can build a friendship with a Fed head as opposed to another handler.
Don't get me wrong. I have a lot of handlers who are my friends, but those guys, like, you know, of all the Fed heads I've had, they've been two of the best ever. And more importantly, they became two of my closest friends. I love you guys. God bless.
Awesome. Mel, thanks so much for coming on the show today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Mikey. I do appreciate it. This is so much fun.
All right, guys, that's going to wrap up another great episode of the Efed podcast. Want to thank Mel so much for taking the time to come on.
Fantastic.
Great to get her perspective
and,
as both a female handler and character in the hobby as a male-dominated hobby.
She's smart.
Brian, what did you think of that interview? Yeah, she's already tipped out. I want to thank her for taking the time, even though she's tired, to come back on the show and talk to us. Hopefully, she's back in a few months, like most of us when we retire. But in the meantime, I want to thank Project Honor for being the spotlight of the week this week on the Efed podcast. Check out Project Honor at projecthonor.proboards.com and at Project Honor 20 on Twitter machine. Check us out over at youtube.com/the Efed podcast. We got our own channel name now, thanks to all of you subscribing over there. So please check us out on YouTube. You can check us out at the Efed podcast in the search bar or youtube.com/the Efed podcast. Hit that subscribe button. We would greatly appreciate
100%
that.
You can't
so
afford
very,
not
very
to.
much.
It's so cheap.
And not only that, but
Amazing
click on
value.
over to patreon.com/Efed podcast. If you want to support the show, that's the number one place to do it. You can get in as little as $3 a month.
Do it.
If you want to be a sponsor on the show, get your ads on the show like you heard today, our other great sponsors, you can do so over at patreon.com/Efed podcast.
HO Wrestling.
Speaking of those sponsors, Defiance Wrestling.com, Occupy Pro Wrestling,
Pop ShootProject.com.
That's right, OCW Fed, Shoot Project.com. And want to thank EFED Tees, EWTs for sponsoring everything we do, because that is us as well. Brian and I doing the EWTs gimmick, getting your EFED t-shirts, your feds, your stables,
don't have
tag teams, your singles. It don't matter. We got it on lock over at EFED.
Go check out that Project Honor custom graphic. It's fantastic. Very handsome graphic.
That's right. Check out some of the custom designs we do, guys. You know, about 75% of what you see is custom from us, designed for other handlers and other feds. And we appreciate everybody's business who's joined so far. We've had a great year in 2020. We're very much looking forward to 2021 with all of you, both on the EFED podcast and EWTs.com. Thank you so much for joining us, Brian. I'm glad you joined us too. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody, over here on the EFED podcast, where the wrestling is written, but the characters are real.
Listening to the Efed podcast, only on the Atomic Jobcast Network, presented commercial free on Patreon.com.